Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. AHS says it's pushing back against misinformation online, which says that children in our province are being hurt by the COVID-19 vaccine. Officials in BC are concerned over the province recording its highest ever monthly number of suspected deaths from toxic illicit drugs in October. And theatre fans in Lethbridge are getting ready to enjoy singing and dancing again as New West Theatre presents Ode to Joy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government wrapped up its fall sitting with the UCP passing a controversial election financing bill. It would make multiple changes, including capping contributions to party nominees and setting a fixed election date in late May. Critics say the legislation opens the door for wealthy donors to bulk buy thousands of partner memberships for other people without their knowledge. Government House Leader Jason Nixon dismissed the criticism. He says the legislation does not open the door for more money, tilting the playing field for memberships in favor of the UCP. He also said that government should never dictate how political parties or private clubs conduct internal affairs. Nixon, who's also the Environment and Parks Minister, was asked why the Alberta government is taking a combative approach with Ottawa when it comes to addressing greenhouse gas emissions. Nixon shot back by saying it's the Trudeau Liberals who've been combative.
First of all, I think that's a mistake to think that that's Alberta's primary position is just being combative. That said, we will be combative when it comes to defending the largest industry in this province. That is our responsibility. In my time as Environment Minister, we've gotten unprecedented equivalency agreements on methane, large emitters, technology innovation emission reduction program. And at the same time, what we've seen from the federal government is them be combative. The Prime Minister appointed a self-described activist as the federal environment minister, somebody who has done illegal activity to be able to block legitimate infrastructure being built inside this country. If that isn't combative, I don't know what would be. And while that's been happening, Alberta's government has been focused on following our technology innovation plan, working with industry to invest billions of dollars inside emission reduction technology in partnership with our industry, creating tens of thousands of jobs. And meanwhile, we still haven't seen anything from the federal government at all when it comes to investment inside the energy.
Health officials in our province say no children have been hospitalized from receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. Alberta Health Services say they are trying to push back against misinformation surrounding the vaccine. The latest data says more than 60,000 kids between the ages of 5 and 11 have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. The province's parents who want a vaccination for their child should seek reliable, accurate information or speak directly with a medical professional. Another big rally is coming up this weekend against having children receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. Parents, teachers, and students will be making their way to Galt Gardens in Lethbridge on Saturday to protest. BCN's Naveen Day joins us now in studio and has more details. Nav?
Yes, Hal. It's called the Worldwide Rally for Children. It's an event to promote freedom of choice for vaccination of youth. Sharissa Clam is a former Calgary paramedic, and she is one of the keynote speakers.
First of all, vaccine mandates, this is actually a drug. It's not a vaccine, first of all. And secondly, mandating anything that goes into anyone's body, whether you're an adult, child, it doesn't matter. It should be, it's our body, it's our choice, it's our freedom of choice. And if I have to have my son, who is 4 turning 5, have vaccine mandates, there is not a chance that that vaccine will ever enter his body.
Clam says she has good reason to protect children from vaccine mandates. She says her vaccination changed her life for the worse.
My vaccine injury is MD confirmed. I have macrocystic anemia, hemolytic anemia, which if you don't know what that is, the vaccine and the antibodies, anti-nuclear antibodies, are destroying my red blood cells. I'm in excruciating pain. I recently was diagnosed with microclots and a pulmonary embolism. Since this vaccine, my blood work and my heart were completely normal, and now it's starting to affect my heart as well.
She adds that she does not want other parents and children to have to endure how her vaccine injury affected her life. She says her ordeal got the attention of the community and politicians.
I've been reached out from hundreds of people who have said they have VAX injuries, and unfortunately, their doctors are not able to diagnose them with the VAX injury due to them possibly losing their job. But I've also been reached out from an overwhelming community support, and MLAs, MPs have also reached out to me to talk about being guest speakers at some of their events.
The event will be held at Gulf Gardens Saturday, December 7th from 3 to 5 p.m. There will be cocoa and cookies available, and Santa will be in attendance. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
RCMP and Fort Macleod say a man who went missing last June has been found dead. 47-year-old James Jenkins, who was first reported missing on June 25th, was discovered south of Fernie, British Columbia on October the 18th. Jenkins' death is not considered suspicious. An autopsy is being performed by the BC Coroner's Office to determine the exact cause of death. Edmonton doctors have reversed an earlier decision demanding that a transplant patient receive the COVID-19 vaccine. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is representing 57-year-old Annette Lewis, who was originally removed from the lung transplant list because she refused to get the jab. To discuss this in more detail is Alison Pejovic, a lawyer with the Justice Centre, who's representing Annette Lewis, and she joins us now from Winnipeg. So Alison, your client Annette Lewis will now be able to get her life-saving surgery?
She filed an injunction application through our Justice Centre, and basically what we're asking for is that the court order that the doctors and AHS can no longer delay her transplant surgery, which she needs in order to survive, because she's not going to get the COVID vaccine. And the judge, we haven't even gone before a judge yet, but what the Edmonton doctors have agreed to do is that in the meantime, while we're waiting to appear before the judge and have this case fully argued, they agreed, this could take weeks, a month or more, that she could have her lung surgery, her transplant surgery, without the need for the COVID-19 vaccine, should a suitable set of lungs come in.
Well, that is good news. Will this open the door for others who are on transplant waiting lists who can get their surgeries without first having to receive the COVID-19 vaccine?
It's not a change in policy, and certainly the doctors and AHS, they've not admitted that they've breached her rights or anything like that. It's just a temporary step until the court rules on it. So the court could rule after this is all finished that, you know, that we don't get the injunction, and then they could go back to, imposing the requirement on her again. So it's temporary, but it is very exciting for her. This is an individual situation. Everyone's situation is different. I know there are other people in similar situations on different lists, but certainly it is a very positive first step, and it gives Ms. Lewis a chance at life, and she hasn't had that chance in months.
Thanks so much, Alison. That was Alison Pejovic, lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Winnipeg. While we were being hit by snow here in southwestern Alberta, Edmonton saw quite a bit of freezing rain. The icy conditions caused more than 200 accidents as the roads turned into skating rinks. Edmonton police reported at least 100 collisions within the city, including 19 hit and runs. RCMP reported 3 jackknife trucks on Highway 16 east of the city. Mounties say there were 7 injury collisions across the province, along with 161 property damage collisions. The roads have been pretty slippery here in southwestern Alberta due to lots of black ice around our region here. Jeanette Rocher is back with a quick look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, fortunately the snow has stopped, but the cooler temperatures have remained?
Yeah, well, it's quite a change from what we have been seeing, isn't it? It does feel like winter is here for sure. Into this evening, we're looking at an overnight low of -7, which is actually still warmer than the seasonal average of lows. We can look at wind gusts of 30 to 50 km per hour. Into tomorrow, Friday, we are looking at sunshine, high of -1. We could be seeing some winds tomorrow as well. I will be back later on this hour to tell you how the weekend weather is shaping up. I'll give you a hint, though. It's going to warm up a bit.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. Winter can take its toll on many of us, including our seniors who oftentimes find themselves shut in. Abe Block is a retired Lethbridge pastor and we recently chatted about the best way we can help some of the most vulnerable here in our city. I asked Abe, should it be the church specifically that reaches out?
We, the people, are the church. So how can we help these seniors during the winter months? I think most of us probably know of seniors struggling. We shouldn't look to the church to set up a program, Hal. I think we are the church, and therefore we can set up our own program. We can look after some of these seniors.
Retired Pastor Abe Block also discusses more specific ways we can help our seniors. He'll share his thoughts in the second half of our program. New West Theatre in Lethbridge is back indoors to provide soaring songs and musical renditions of big hits. Performers put on a dress rehearsal today to showcase their talents. As Micah Quinn explains, Lethbridge theatre fans are in for a sweet treat.
Ode to Joy is the first indoor show for New West Theatre in close to 2 years.
It's our ode to joy, to feeling good, to the things that make us feel good. Because after the last 2 years where the world has been, pretty lousy for the most part, we wanted to return to the stage and, celebrate. And celebrate being together, celebrate the music, celebrate the experience, and just really lean into that and try and be incredibly positive.
Alanafi Lupuai and Kyle Greninger are two of the star performers of Ode to Joy, calling it a theatrical musical review.
Lots of songs.
Yeah, but
comedy.
they're all like really good, happy, uplifting songs, and that was the approach that directors Erica and Scott took, was just to incorporate songs that were really about joy and make people smile, songs that feel familiar to the ear, and just really just get people excited to be back with seeing live theater again.
New West Theatre put on outdoor shows this past summer, but Greninger and Lupuai say performing indoors is a much more intimate way to bring forth musical theatre.
We did the outdoor show, of course, last summer, which was a lot of fun, but it was just different. Everyone was in cars and that kind of thing. We're really looking forward to have that personal connection back with the audience, I think.
Give us an opportunity to connect more, and really the songs that we're singing are super fun and get people excited and just happy to be to some semblance of normalcy again. So very exciting.
Ode to Joy will run from December 15th to the 31st, and you can purchase tickets by calling 403-329-7328. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
That's also a sharp-looking jacket that Mike is wearing there. Thanks so much, Micah. Now here's an update to a previous story we brought you on Bridge City News. The University of Lethbridge Faculty Association members have been without a contract for over 500 days now. The association has moved their headquarters to a new location in downtown Lethbridge to support members if they take job action, such as a strike. The president of the UFLA, Dan O'Donnell, says his members' needs are not being met at the bargaining table. A mediator was put in place, and talks between the two parties were completed this week.
The results of that, we agreed that we wouldn't say too much about what was going on while that's ongoing. I think it's fair to say that there was movement on both sides, and at the same time, we're nowhere close to an agreement yet. What we do know is that the mandate has changed in the province, and I think that that's showing up. We don't have anything specifically about how it's supposed to have changed yet, but we've seen from other tables what the mandate would look like. So I think there has been progress, but not nearly as much as we'd hope to see perhaps at this time.
Back in November, the UFLA held a rally at the University of Lethbridge mentioning the talks have hit a snag with the university. A Calgary man has entered a plea of manslaughter in the New Year's Eve death of Calgary Police Sergeant Andrew Harnett. Amir Abdul Rahman was a passenger in the vehicle during the hit-and-run death and apologized to the police officer's family.
What happened to Mr. Abdul Rahman is not unusual for some young men at that age. They hang out with the wrong group and, they get themselves into some minor trouble. And unfortunately, he was hanging with the wrong group when this happened to him in this event on last New Year's Eve. So it had some bad consequences for him, but as we heard in court today, he's seen the error of his ways. My client's apology, first of all, which was quite heartfelt, and I'm sure that they took it in the way in which he meant it, which is that he is so sorry for their loss, so sorry that this has happened, so sorry for them that he had any part of this whatsoever. And clearly by pleading guilty to manslaughter, my client admits that he had a part in it. I say not a very big part. the 2-year sentence that we suggest on behalf of Mr. Abdul Rahman is long enough. It's a penitentiary term, so it's long enough to send a message.
British Columbia recorded its highest ever monthly number of suspected deaths from toxic illicit drugs, with 201 in October. Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe says expanding access to safe alternatives is necessary in saving lives. She says 6 people are dying every day, more than 5 years after the province first declared a public health emergency.
We have lost more than 8,500 people in our province to toxic drugs since 2016. This is a health crisis. We know that our province has asked the federal government for an exemption to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to decriminalize personal possession of illicit substances in our province. This step, however, even if approved tomorrow, will not reduce the imminent risks to those dependent on the profit-driven, toxic, illicit drug market. As long as people are dependent on the for-profit, unregulated, illicit drug market, their lives are in jeopardy. The only way to ensure that the supply of drugs is safe is to provide access to safe supply.
Saskatchewan says it plans to reduce a surgery backlog by using private healthcare providers for certain procedures. Health Minister Paul Merriman says the goal is to eliminate the backlog by achieving a 3-month wait time by the year 2030. Merriman says the pandemic has been overwhelming hospitals and there are 35,000 people waiting for surgery. The government has not decided yet which procedures will be privatized, but says they will still be publicly funded. A Winnipeg City Council committee has rejected a call to fund an emergency extreme weather shelter for the homeless by moving funds between disaster assistance and grants. Instead, the committee has voted to seek $650,000 in provincial disaster prevention funds. It says the money would help cover part of the costs for a warming space and shelter. A group of PEI potato farmers were on Parliament Hill handing out potatoes, thanking supporters, and raising awareness of the effects of the export ban on island spuds to the United States. 2 weeks ago, Ottawa said it would suspend all shipments of fresh potatoes from PEI to the United States after the recent discovery of a fungus called potato wart growing on 2 potato farms.
We're up here to show our appreciation to Canadians, to people from Ottawa for supporting our potato industry in this plight that's going on with our industry. Our industry, 2.5 weeks ago, there was a restrictions put on that we could not ship our potatoes to the United States and to Puerto Rico and other places.
What is the hope that the handing out of potatoes here today will accomplish?
Just to raise awareness to the politicians and to the people that are doing the negotiations to get this trade issue resolved as quickly as possible because of the damage it is doing to our economy, to our farmers, to everybody involved in the island.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she would never forgive former President Donald Trump and his bullies that he sent to the Capitol for the trauma that was exerted on staff during the January 6th riot.
I don't think that whatever preparation anybody would have made, that anybody could predict that the President of the United States would incite an insurrection, and a violent one. So I don't fault anybody for not knowing, who have responsibility of communication and the rest on all of this, that the president was instigating this. I'm very proud of the work of the January 6th committee. As you see, we see it together in the public domain, the actions that they are taking to seek the truth. And the truth will tell us some things about our exposure then further.
The persecution of Christians continues unabated around the world. According to Voice of the Martyrs Canada, some of the worst countries include Nigeria, North Korea, China, and Afghanistan. Greg Musselman is the Minister at Large from Voice of the Martyrs Canada, and he says things have been pretty bad for believers in Afghanistan since the Taliban regained control. He says, however, that it's important that not all Christians leave the country.
When this first happened, a lot of, I think, well-meaning Christian organizations said, we're going to get all the Christians out of the country. Well, if that happens, what about the light of the gospel? What about the last 20 years, since the Taliban was pushed from, out of control there? I mean, they've been causing problems all along. But for those that have come to know Jesus, if they all leave, I mean, what would the situation be?
Greg will also discuss how countries like China and India are trying to eradicate Christianity altogether. That interview is coming up after Business News. Despite conflict and persecution, children around the world are determined to celebrate Christmas. Open Doors interviewed kids to hear their hopes and expectations this Christmas season.
أنا بتمنى بعيد الميلاد إنه نضل مجموعين على الفرح، يعني نضل كل عيد ميلاد نضل عائلة إيد وحدة، يعني ما نتفرق.
Prayer yangu ni kwamba church yetu expand juu mostly watu huwa hawatoshei siku ya Christmas. Ningetaka church yetu expand ndio watu watoshe.
نيلي إنه رب الملوك نزل على الأرض ليفدينا من الخطايا.
صلي كل مرة عيد الميلاد مشان يكون كله فرح للناس.
Namaskar kau coba pun dah dengan kismat dicerot dah kalmat ki.
That's so beautiful to see kids all over the world celebrating Christmas. So nice to see a little sunshine today as we hovered around the freezing mark. An even warmer trend is on the way. Full weather details are coming up. Well, the snow has stopped here in southwestern Alberta and some of it's even melted. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, are we starting to see a bit of a warming trend?
Well, yeah, we are going to be above seasonal for the weekend. We do have to get through a little bit of a cooler Friday first, though. Into tomorrow, Friday, -1 is the high. Into Saturday, though, look at that warm up happening. High of 6 degrees, 2 degrees for Sunday, -3 for Monday. Monday also now showing a chance of flurries. Earlier today, they were showing those flurries happening on Tuesday. So we're looking at Monday to Tuesday flurries happening. -6 is the high on Tuesday, -4 for Wednesday. So we're going to warm up and then we're going to see that cooling trend happen all over again. Now, average high for this time of year is 1. Average low, -11. 14 was where we were at back in 1957. That was our warmest on record. Coldest on record was in 1977, right there, -37. 8:16 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this afternoon, 4:31 p.m. So we're just a little over 8 hours of daylight. Looking at rain tomorrow on the west coast, in fact, a 70% chance of rain in Victoria, high of 8 degrees, 60% chance of rain in Vancouver, 5 degrees is the high expected there tomorrow. Tomorrow in Edmonton, -4 the high, little chilly, mix of sun and cloud, sunshine expected tomorrow though in Calgary with a high of -1. Now as we look to the prairies, we're seeing lots of sunshine, -8 the high in Saskatoon, -5 in Regina, and -7 will be the high tomorrow in Winnipeg with the sunny skies. Of course, expect temperatures to feel a little cooler, especially in the morning with that wind chill. As we look to central Canada, we're looking at Toronto, high of 7 degrees tomorrow. Flurries expected tomorrow in Ottawa, -2 the expected high, and scattered flurries also expected tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 0. As we look to Atlantic Canada got pummeled by the worst snowstorm of the year. Still feeling the effects of that as there were many closures today of schools and businesses. Fredericton still expecting the snowflakes tomorrow, -1 the high there. Halifax, -2, no more snow there. Mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. Charlottetown could still get some flurries tomorrow, high of -3. St. John's under a winter storm watch this evening. Could get quite a bit of rain and snow. But tomorrow, mainly sunny skies there with 80km/h winds, especially along the coast. So watch out for that, guys. -5 the high there. There you go. That is your weather.
The average Canadian family is expected to pay an extra 7% on their grocery bill in 2022. Food prices are expected to hit new records. According to Canada's Food Price Report, the annual grocery bill for a family of 4 will increase by $966 in the new year, climbing to a total of almost $15,000. That's the biggest jump ever predicted by the annual report. Research suggests that overall grocery bills have skyrocketed by up to 70% over the last 20 years. In addition to rising prices and labor shortages, researchers expect food retailers could see an increase in food theft. The parent company of Sobeys says profit in its second quarter was up almost 9% from a year earlier to $175.4 million. Empire says sales were up nearly 5% to $7.32 billion following the acquisition of the Longo supermarket chain earlier this year. It says growth was also helped by higher fuel prices and the expansion of its Freshco and Farm Boy banners. Empire says the gains were offset by a stabilization of shopper behavior as COVID-19 restrictions were eased across the country. A new forecast is predicting fossil fuel in Canada could drop by as much as 62% over the next 3 decades. The outlook from the Canada Energy Regulator is based on the current pace of efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It suggests Canadians will use less gasoline and diesel in the coming years, leading to a large decline in the use of refined petroleum products by the year 2050. At the same time, electricity use is forecast to rise by 45% as more Canadians transition to electric vehicles. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 151 points in the day to 20,925. The Dow was down just under a point to 35,755. The S&P 500 was down 33 points to 4667. And the Nasdaq was down 269 points of the day to 15,517. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.73 to $70.63 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to $3.79 US. Gold was up 2 cents to $17.7536 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $21.96 US an ounce. Wheat is at $12.66 per bushel, barley's at $9.73, canola's at $22.79, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were down 83 cents to $136.73, feeder cattle were up 68 cents to $164.08, and lean hogs were up $1.60 to $72.43. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.67 US. Recapping one of our top stories, health officials in Alberta say no children have been hospitalized from receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. Alberta Health Services says they are trying to push back against misinformation surrounding the vaccine. The latest data says more than 60,000 kids between the ages of 5 and 11 have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Even though the Taliban is now in full control of Afghanistan, Christians should not leave the country. Now that's according to Greg Musselman with the Voice of the Martyrs Canada, who will explain why next. The persecution of Christians around the world appears to be intensifying. Recent reports say an average of 17 followers of Jesus are killed each and every day in Nigeria alone. China and India have governments that are allegedly intent on eradicating Christianity altogether. To discuss this in more detail is Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs Canada. Greg is the Minister at Large for the group and host of the podcast Closer to the Fire. Greg, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Always good to see you, Hal.
You too, brother. Now, before we discuss some of the countries outlined earlier, what's the situation like for Christians in Afghanistan since the Taliban regained control of the country?
Yeah, it is a difficult situation. I mean, not only for Christians, women, children. I mean, it's a real hard situation. But, particularly the followers of Jesus, I mean, they were already facing persecution, even before the Taliban came to power. But, you got radical Islamic groups, you have violent protests, you have the political activity taking place and making it just a very dangerous place to live for Christians, and especially those who have converted from Islam to Christianity, which is the thousands of Christians that are in the country. Most of them come from Islamic backgrounds, so they're facing, beatings and, torture, and some cases martyrdom. It's really hard. I was actually talking on my podcast recently, Hal, to a guy by the name of John Weaver. John is an American. He worked in Afghanistan for over 20 years. And he says it is so heartbreaking almost every day getting messages from people in Afghanistan, not only the Christians, but the Muslims as well, saying, we need to get out of here. It's dangerous. We're going to die if we're found out. So we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. One of the things that's asked too is how many Christians are in Afghanistan. Some say as few as 3,000, maybe as many as 12,000. And as my friend John Weaver says, not enough. But they are definitely being targeted, as are others. Anybody seen collaborating with the groups outside of the Taliban are facing danger at this time.
Now, we've heard reports that the Taliban is actually going door to door looking for Christians and North Americans. What have you heard?
Yeah, I've been hearing reports of that as well. In fact, even just listening to some of the international news coming across, we don't hear as much about it in Canada now. It's kind of faded off the front pages of our newspapers and that. But what we are hearing, though, is that there's these summary executions taking place for those that oppose the Taliban. Now, even the Taliban is saying, no, we've changed. We're kind of a softer version now. We're not going to kill our enemies. We're going to forgive them. But the reality is that is not happening. Now, in some cases, there may be those in the Taliban. Sure, they're more political. They need the aid. I mean, they are a country that's supported by, countries like Canada. But there are those that even maybe getting direction from the government, the Taliban government, to go around and, kill the enemies that they see as potentially coming back and being able to pull them from power. And so anybody seen as an enemy, including the Christians, are facing dangerous times. So again, this is a very volatile situation. But before we move off of Afghanistan, let me just say one thing here. When this first happened, a lot of, I think, well-meaning Christian organizations said, we're going to get all the Christians out of the country. Well, if that happens, what about the light of the gospel? What about the last 20 years, since the Taliban was pushed from, out of control there? I mean, they've been causing problems all along. But for those that have come to know Jesus, if they all leave, I mean, what would the situation be? And again, getting back to my friend John Weaver, he's talking to many of the Christians in Afghanistan who are saying, we don't want to leave. We want to stay. The only hope for this broken nation, this nation that's been stuck in war, in repression for years and years, is Jesus. And so we're going to stay. We're going to risk our lives. Now, on the other hand, as a dad, and seeing what's happening, especially when I think of my daughters and granddaughters now, is that I would not want them to live in Afghanistan, can't go to school, can't work. So I'd understand why believers and others want to leave the country, but, we need to be praying for, especially for those that want to stay.
Canada's moved forward with a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, mostly due to China's poor record when it comes to human rights. How bad are the human rights violations of minorities in China?
They're terrible. I mean, when we hear about the Uyghur Muslims, in the western part of China, 1 to 3 million of those people are in basically concentration camps. It's a horrible situation. We're hearing about possible political boycotts, and I think there's going to be even some pressure put on the athletes not going. Now, if you're an athlete and you've been training your whole life to go, I understand why you want to go. I love the Olympics, so we're less than 2 months from that. Yeah, but the human rights violations, are terrible there. Now, so you have the Uyghur Christians, or the Uyghur Muslims, and there are some Uyghur Christians as well. You have other minority groups, including Christians, although when you think about China, 100 to 120 million Christians, it's hard to consider them just a minority. But you've got, the Communist Party of China. Their ideology is, of course, atheistic. They don't want religion in there, and they are very bent on trying to eradicate the church, although we know that's not going to happen. I mean, from a theological, biblical perspective, the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. But, I talked to people like Dr. Bob Fu. He is the founder and president of China Aid, one of our partners with the Voice of the Martyrs. They work with persecuted Christians and other religious minorities. Is saying, you know what, this is a horrible situation. Since 2018, President Xi and his government have made it one of their, priorities to try to eliminate religion from the country. But, in talking to Bob Fu about this, and he was telling me, Purdue University, secular university in Indiana, released a study 3 years ago looking at 100 years of religion in China, not just Christianity, but the sociologists and, that are studying these things estimate there's between 100 to 130 million Christians in China. And if there's not severe persecution, that number could jump to well over 200 million by 2030. But it's a question of, the severe persecution, because we've seen how persecution has actually been used to raise up the church in China. And so, we think that and believe that, the persecution has been used to grow the church in China, but extreme persecution may cause people, to want to back down. And the interesting thing is, okay, they've attacked the underground church, the house churches, any group that's not registered by the government. But now even the Chinese Communist Party is going after the government-controlled churches, the three self-patriotic churches, tearing down the crosses all over the country and also arresting some of the government pastors. So it's a very difficult situation. And, we've got situations even right now where there's a church near in the southern part of China called the Shenzhen Holy Reformed Church, where 27 adults and 32 children actually left the country. They're led by a pastor by the name of Pan Yongguan, and they went to South Korea, Jeju Island, because the persecution became so severe that people are being tortured, imprisoned, and so they're now trying to get to America through Texas, actually. There's a number of churches down there that have said that we will take these people in because, again, talking to Bob Fu, saying that if they are sent back to China, they will be tortured. They may, be imprisoned and in some cases killed. So this ramping up, of the Chinese government in this, where they're trying to bring them into the ideology, and they see Christianity and other religions getting in the way of what they want to do. But I think it's, and I would, hopefully our country will join at least the political boycott and put more pressure on China. Although, as we've seen in the past, they don't seem to bow down to pressure in any real way.
India apparently also has a campaign that has led to an increase of religiously motivated persecution against Christians. How is that happening?
Well, yeah, and you're right. The level of violence against Christians in India by Hindu extremists, and this is really being fueled by the BJP, which is the governing party, Prime Minister Modi in the nation, that they want to eliminate anything that doesn't go along, again, with their ideology and their religion of Hinduism. So this deadly campaign really coincides with the Indian government's agenda to turn India into a Hindu nation. And as a result, Christians are facing an increase in religiously motivated persecution. And, we look at a number of these states and the anti-conversion laws that are taking place. So you have Jharkhand, you have Uttar Pradesh, you have Tamil Nadu, you have Chhattisgarh, now considered the most dangerous places, to be a Christian. So you have beatings, arrest, church destruction, and at times death are occurring. And I just give you one example. There's a 16-year-old boy by the name of Nitish Kumar. He's from the northern Indian state of Bihar, and he had acid thrown on him this past summer, left him with severe burns, over 60% of his body. Wow. Now, a local pastor got Nitish to a clinic. They treated him and then sent him to a severe burn clinic as well. Unfortunately, he died of his injuries. Trying to find out the motive behind this, really unknown at this point. But there are members of the Christian community that believe it because of his Christian activities, along with his brother, that Nitish and his brother, they were holding prayer meetings. And the two actually had come to faith in Jesus 2 years ago. So that really is seen by these Hindu radicals as something that they're not going to tolerate. And as a result of that, they take these actions. And then when the Christians go to the police to, bring charges or, to bring a complaint, the, situation is often ignored. So, things are definitely increasing. I mean, we look at China, we look at India, the two, most populated nations in the world. And there really is this concerted effort to try to eliminate Christianity, or at least to slow down the growth of the gospel.
Now, Greg, we're constantly hearing of Christian villages being attacked by militant Muslims in Nigeria. Why isn't the government there doing more to protect its citizens?
Hal, that is a great question. And I have asked it, from a number of our partners, in Nigeria. Pastor Yunusa Madu, he is with Christian Solidarity Worldwide, also the General Secretary for the Evangelical Winning All Denomination. And I said, why are these things continue to happen? I mean, just last week, again, a village was attacked, primarily a Christian village in northern Nigeria. 10 believers were killed, homes were destroyed, church burned down, and it goes on and on and on. And I know that Yunusa told me, every morning he wakes up, it seems there's another attack. So why isn't the government doing more? Either they are not all that engaged, they don't care, they say they do. There's always these public statements coming out that they're shocked and they're appalled by what's going on, but they don't seem to be doing much. And, whether they don't have the capability or the political will to do something, But the sad part is that many of our brothers and sisters in Christ are constantly being killed. I mean, just from the first 200 days of this year, and I know that these statistics will soon be updated, but you've had over 3,400 Christians killed just in the first 200 days of 2021. And then last year, that's about the same amount that were killed for the whole of last year. So it's increasing. As you mentioned off the top, 17 believers on an average being killed every single day. And this just goes on and on. And one of the things I think it's important for us, Hal, to remember is that these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. These are individuals. You know, think of Pastor Silas Yakubu Ali, Kaduna State. Recently, he went out for a pastoral visit. Well, the next morning, he didn't show up at home. He had been murdered by militant Muslims. Now, whether it was the Boko Haram or the Fulani herdsmen, at that time, we didn't hear anybody claiming, responsibility. And then the day they discovered Pastor Ali's body, they also found out that another 10 Christians or so had been killed in a church that he was also giving oversight of. It's not only the killing of the Christians, and then there's the kidnapping of the girls and the women forced into these marriages, often these young girls with older Muslim men, they're forced into Islam. It is a horrible situation. Now, also might say too, is that it's not only Christians that are being killed by these radical groups, these militant Islamic groups, but it's also Muslims that are sympathetic towards Christians, or they don't go along with this very radical idea of Islam, and they are also suffering as well. And we need to remember, these even people in the Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsmen, we know of those that have come to Jesus when they see the way that our brothers and sisters are dying, the way, even in the midst of horrible situations, that there's that peace, and they're coming to know Jesus. So we don't look at them as the enemy. Yes, they're doing horrible things, but we also know that God loves them too. And that is the message that I continue to hear through Nigeria, through at least the churches I've been in contact with, and I've been there a number of times, is they continue to preach forgiveness and love and mercy. Many of these people, they have no idea what they're doing in terms of the violence that they're perpetrating against the followers of Jesus. So our prayers need to be, for our brothers and sisters, certainly in Christ, those that love Jesus, and also for those persecutors, because Jesus told us even to be praying and to blessing our persecutors. So we need to be doing that. But Nigeria continues to be a hotbed. I'll be honest, I read about it almost every day. Something else is happening, and it's tragic.
Have to keep them in our prayers, absolutely. Greg Musselman is the Minister at Large for the Voice of the Martyrs Canada. He also hosts the Closer to the Fire podcast. Greg, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Hal.
The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly taken its toll on everyone, including our seniors. Now that winter is here, that can also pose a lot of challenges for our seniors. How should we best help those in our community most vulnerable who need assistance? Joining me now to discuss this is retired Lethbridge pastor Abe Locke, who's a senior himself. Abe, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Abe, what are some of the biggest challenges that winter presents for a lot of our seniors?
Well, I think there's a number of things that winter presents. Number one, the sidewalks, the roads, everything gets a little slippery. Number two, a lot of seniors still love to drive. Getting out in the car feels a little insecure and dangerous for them. And so what happens is they stay home a lot more, and then loneliness sets in. And unless somebody is willing to give them a hand in that, winter creates a bit of a problem for them. And loneliness is an issue. And I think that's where a lot of us who have the abilities need to get involved in their lives.
I know some seniors still have to get out there and shovel the snow. My mother-in-law is a fine example, 79 years young. But sometimes that can be a bit of an issue, and that can also be dangerous at the same time, right?
That can be very dangerous. You see, Hal, to me, there are some issues here. I know that we often talk about the church getting involved in things like this and helping our seniors. Well, my question is, who is the church? You and I are the church. And I think too often we see the church as a building or our leadership people. And a couple of Sundays ago, we had an incredible message from one of our pastors talking about the ministry belongs to the people. And we, the people, are the church. So how can we help these seniors during the winter months? I think most of us probably know of seniors struggling. We shouldn't look to the church to set up a program, Hal. I think we are the church, and therefore we can set up our own programs. We can look after some of these seniors. We can drive them to church. I know in our church, I know a number of people that go and pick up seniors in the winter particularly, and they'll take them to church with them. Now, I know that during COVID, that's been a bit of a challenge, and so we can talk about that as well. But I really would like to come back to the fact that you and I are the church. And so I think the responsibility biblically belongs to us. We shouldn't look anywhere else.
Yeah, so when you see your neighbor in need, who may especially be a senior, or other seniors in senior centers who need that hand, we should be willing, like you said, as the church, give people a helping hand. But how does an older person know when it's actually time to hang up the shovel and maybe let somebody else do the snow plowing and the snow shoveling?
Well, I know for myself, I live in a condo. And by the way, that leads to an issue as well. More and more of our seniors, Hal, are living in condos or living we happen to live in a ground level condo, not a high rise. And so I could be shoveling. But because it's a condo, I have monthly fees that go into that. And like, for example, this morning early, the guys were out here taking care of all of my snow. So I don't have to think about that anymore. And I think there are a lot of seniors that are living places like this, so it's not as big an issue anymore. But I know a good friend of mine who still lives in a house. He has a regular fella from his neighborhood, a young fella who wants to make some money. And he simply has hired him to take care of all snow shoveling. And again, I think if we realize this, we know the people that are living in houses and need their sidewalks shoveled and their driveways shoveled. We need to get involved in that and help them out. And if we have, like I have a lot of grandchildren in their area, if we have grandchildren that we can hire to help with this, I think that's a great idea as well. It's something, we are the church. And so it's something that we can do. We don't need to wait for a program from the church.
Abe, let's touch base on the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's really impacted our seniors. With the current restrictions, it's a real challenge to be able to visit people in long-term care facilities. Do you think churches should maybe consider setting up teams to either take turns phoning or connecting via Zoom to make sure that seniors get some sort of a visit?
Well, again, Hal, I want to say, who is the church? We are the church. And sometimes these things need help. Organization from church staff or something like that. But on the other hand, I think we can also, on our own, do this kind of stuff. Now, I know that in our church, we did something particular at the beginning of this COVID, and apparently it is still going strong. The church organized a number of people who had the time and who were willing to phone. And then we divided the church totally and gave the names and phone numbers to these people. And then they would call. Every so often, they would call just to be in touch. So yes, I think that's a good plan. On the other hand, I happen to also be a small group leader, and we have a lot of small groups. So I think the responsibility of the small group leader could take care of that as well. Keep in touch with the people that are in your group. And a lot of them are young people. That's fine. You can still be in touch. I happen to have a more senior number of people in my group. So I make it a point to try and call them now and then. And of course, the other thing that we did, Hal, we had a number of people in a senior's home that were still really with it, but they didn't like to drive or come out, especially in the evenings. So I took part of my group and I went to a certain home where these people were. And I did the Bible studies at the home so that they didn't have to move, and we did it in the afternoon because most of these people could come. So there are ways that we can help these people not have to move out and yet be involved and have contact weekly.
When people feel lonely and isolated, sometimes they fall into a self-pity trap. Any advice for seniors on how to keep a positive outlook on life?
Well, that's a challenge because there are certain people who are more assertive. For them, it's easier because they'll get on the phone, they'll make contact, they'll do that themselves. And that's a very positive thing to do. Don't sit back and wait for everybody else. But then there are those who are quiet and reserved. I would encourage them anyway. Get involved. You also have time. You also have a telephone. Don't wait around for somebody else to do it. And if you have someone, for example, my wife and I help at a thrift store 2 or 3 days a week. Well, we're still able. So that really helps, though, especially during COVID, because the thrift store, it closed for a while at the beginning, but then, stores were allowed to be open with restrictions. So we were allowed to go and help. That makes a major difference. And like you said before, if people can't get out, that's more of a challenge. But I have a good friend whose mother was kind of quarantined in her home, but they were allowed to have a bubble. And so she and her brother were the bubble part. They went weekly to see their mother to make sure that she didn't get too lonely. So, we can do that if we're vaccinated or whatever.
Now, Abe, driving can be extremely difficult, especially in the winter months. So a lot of seniors simply don't go out. They feel like a shut-in. Do you think there's maybe an opportunity that we can maybe get groceries for some of our seniors, even drive them to the store, or maybe even join them for a mall walk, take them to the mall?
I think we can definitely do that. And I've seen it happen. I know that some of my friends do that for their parents. And people do want to get out. And unfortunately, some of them want to drive so badly that they actually do get out in their cars, and it's not a good scene out there in the roads. But I think we definitely can do that. But again, I come back to the fact that who is the church? We are the church. We can look out for these situations, especially somebody like my wife and myself, for example. We're on in age a little bit, but we're still able to help. We're still able to drive. We're still able to do those things. We know of people our ages and older, and I think we need to make that contact without waiting for, let's say, the physical church, the leadership of the church, to do something about that. We can lay hold of that.
Abe, it's always great when young people make time to help seniors figure out their computers and their cell phones. Now, the interesting part seems to be that when this happens, there's often an exchange of sorts with seniors maybe sharing some stories and wisdom with the younger generation, and there's that solid connection there, isn't there?
I used to work with youth back in Calgary as a ministry. We deliberately set up these kinds of things with the seniors in our church. We took the names of these people, we would get in touch with them, we would plan a visit, and then we would take a number of our youth to their place, and we would spend time with them and have a visit with them, just to visit, just to get across communication between youth and seniors, because seniors have a lot to offer. And I think sometimes we miss out on that by kind of setting them off to the side a little more than what we should. And I think it's a great idea. That kind of thing probably needs to be planned by the youth sponsors in the church. That's something that our youth will probably not do on their own. So I think that's where leadership can really get involved and do some planning and have that communication. I think that communication is essential for both the youth and for our seniors.
Now, another area where we could perhaps help some of our seniors with is small home repairs, or maybe even help change a tire, for example. What are your thoughts on those?
Wow, I think that's a great possibility. For example, I have a couple of good friends who are mechanics, and all I need to do is make arrangements for these seniors with them. I mean, for me, I'm not a mechanic, so I can't help much. But I do know people who can. And again, because we are the church, we can make those arrangements and we can help. I remember the one church that I was in British Columbia, we were pastoring. We had what we called a help board in the foyer. And people that needed help would come and write on there what they needed. They would put their name and phone number on. Other people who had the ability would look at the board every Sunday and say, oh, okay, here's something where I can go and help. It was a great plan. And it was on the board in the foyer in the church. And so people communicated that way, and a lot of help happened, not only to the seniors, but to single moms and people like that as well. I thought it was a great idea. It worked well.
Abe, any final thoughts on what we can do to better serve our seniors and our communities?
Let's remember what the Bible's definition of church is. In Romans 12, in Ephesians 1, it talks about being the body of Christ. And when you think of your body and you think of missing a finger or something, it's incredible how that impacts your life. And so if we think of that as the church, we are the church. I think we need to be more cognizant of every finger, every thumb, every senior, every younger person. We need to be cognizant of the body and be looking out for one another. Because we look at Revelation chapter 7, for example. In the final end, it says, when we get to eternity, there will be people from every tribe and nation sharing and fellowshipping together. That needs to be our goal down here as well. And I think with the technology we've had in our churches, we've seen that happen. I know in our church, we have had people worshiping with us on a Sunday morning from countries all over the world. What an exciting thing to have happen. And to me, that would be our goal.
Abe Block is a retired Lethbridge pastor, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Abe.
Take care. God bless, Hal.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.